What's up, guys? This is James from the Timur podcast, and I am finally back. I have been sick for about a month and was completely unable to do pretty much about anything, including making videos and podcast episodes. So that wasn't great, but I'm finally back, and I do want to finish going through all of these factions. So if you're new to this, this is the mod Tsardoms Total War, Fall of Constantinople for the video game Medieval 2 Total War. And what we've been doing is going through every playable faction one by one and taking a look at their campaign setup, their roster, and then I play as them and show my results. So, today we are looking at the Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, as they are sometimes called, and it is the final hour of the Byzantine or Roman Empire. You'll see here that it is 1448 AD, and as this is the Fall of Constantinople mod, we are 5 years from the fateful 1453 collapse of the Roman Empire. So, they are a playable faction, and let's take a look at what that looks like. You start off with 7 settlements, and you can kind of see here, they're over in the Mauryan Peninsula, as well as a bit of land in eastern Thrace, and then a few Aegean islands. You are Orthodox Christian, your allies are the Genoese, and you are at war with the Ottomans. So, one enemy and one ally, but as we'll see, that's still very terrible. That is a terrible situation, because if we look at the map over here, if I click on the Ottoman Empire, you will see that we are utterly surrounded by the Ottomans. And not only that, there are quite a few other factions who would love to just gobble up the rest of the remains of the Roman Empire. So things are not looking good at all. As for historical background, I'll kind of scroll through this in case you want to pause and read it, but basically the Roman Empire has been on a downward spiral for the last 200 years. You could even argue 400 years, with a few times that it stopped the downward decline, but in the end, we are not doing well at all. The Ottomans have been... they crossed the Aegean. They have basically taken all of our holdings in Bulgaria and Macedonia and Thessaly, and the Genoese and the Venetians have been eating up a lot of our islands, including, of course, the island of Crete. And then we have our old enemies, the Serbians, the Albanians, other Slavic and Orthodox people who have a long history of war and hatred for the Roman Empire. So, enemies are many, friends are few. But let's take a look at our winning conditions. To win as the Roman Empire, we need to hold 40 regions, including Constantinople, Central Thrace, and all of these other cities as well. I'm not going to read all of them. And for the short campaign, consolidation, you only need to hold 15 regions, including a few of the same. So, that doesn't sound too difficult, but this is a difficult campaign, as you can imagine. And there are a few tips and tricks I've learned with them. I've played as the Romans a few times, but it is a difficult campaign. As for your strengths, large variety of early era units, excellent selection of mercenaries from both east and west, high quality specialized units. I would say all of that is very true, but especially that last bit, high quality specialized units, absolutely, and we'll take a look at them more when we get to the roster. And weaknesses, yeah, lacks late era professional units, that is definitely true, and surrounded by the Ottoman Turks, as we just saw a minute ago. And yeah, it's not just the Ottomans, you were surrounded by all sorts of factions that hate your guts. So it's gonna be a battle for survival from turn one, and even once you get a foothold, it's still a really difficult campaign. But nevertheless, It is the Roman Empire. They have some phenomenal units, including the Varangian Guard, as you can see here, and they are definitely one of my favorite factions. So I think that's about it for that, so let's jump into the campaign map. Okay, so upon loading up the campaign map, this is the welcome that you are given, so I will briefly scroll through this, and basically it just gives more backstory. We are on our last hour as the Roman Empire. The crusade at Varna was kind of our last hope, and it was crushed just a few years ago, and now we are just waiting out the inevitable attack on Constantinople. So let's look at the overview. It is 1448. We only start with 5,000 florins, which is not a great amount, especially because we're going to need as much money as possible to mount the Roman defense against the Turks. As for diplomacy, like we talked about, we are allies with the Genoese. We have a perfect relationship with them. We have military access. They have military access, and we are at war with the Ottomans. They hate us. They want us out of the world. As far as our relations with everybody else, it's typically not great. It's a little less than average, I would say. And then when we get to the Muslim factions, they hate us. We obviously have a long history with them. If we look at some of the other Orthodox nations, they do typically like us, but I've found that with the Romans, it is very difficult to make alliances, even if you share a religion. So do be aware of that. And obviously, once we get down here, the Papal States, they're not a big fan of us, our Catholic brothers. So yeah, we're not well liked except for our other Orthodox friends and the Genoese. If we look at this, we have 7 regions, 4 castles, 3 cities, and this map kind of shows a lot of the regions we need to control. So basically, we need to reestablish ourselves on Anatolia, we need to take Thessalonica, we need to take Athens, and we need to take Crete. These are obviously some of the jewels of the Roman Empire in the past, and we need to rebuild it. But before we can rebuild the empire, we need to focus on survival, because it is 1448. And if you are playing with scripts, as I highly recommend that you do, as you may well know, 2 large Ottoman armies will spawn in 1453 right on top of Constantinople, and they will attack, and it is a tough fight. So yeah, we need to get our defenses up as quickly as possible. So let's take a look at what we have. We, of course, do have Constantinopolis. It is one of the best cities in the game. We are making about 4,000 florins a turn from it. If we look, it is very well built up. As far as unique buildings, we have the walls of Constantinople. They give some really nice benefits with happiness and law. We have the Hagia Sophia, which gives some nice benefits. The Great Palace ruins. This can be upgraded, I believe, once it is rebuilt. Yes, the Great Palace of Constantinople. You can rebuild it. It takes 10 turns, and it costs $17,000, but it gives you this public order bonus due to law at 10%, which is huge, especially with fighting corruption. So obviously, we are a far way off from ever building this, but later in the game, I do recommend that you build this because it does give some great benefits. We also have the Aqueduct of Valens, which gives some nice health benefits, and our Palace, which gives us access to our best unique units, which we'll take a look at later. And then the Imperial University of Constantinople gives some other good benefits. So a lot of unique buildings here, all of them very nice. And you can see that we are able to train some great units right from the start, including some trebuchets and whatnot, some nice naval units. But a lot of the Byzantine units are great early game units, but they suffer in the later game. So again, we'll talk about that later on the battlefield. But you do have a pretty nice selection of trainable units, including some Genoese Pavese crossbowmen, although watch that upkeep cost, 500 is pretty pricey. And yes, so that's that. Let's look at the garrison. We have our Emperor, and he's pretty good. Could definitely be better, but he's got some nice traits and whatnot. And then we have a very nice garrison here with some elite units, so we might be safe for a couple turns at least, but that's gonna stop pretty soon. We also have a few generals sitting around here. If we take a look, this guy is pretty good. He could definitely be turned into a great general. Over here, this guy could be a good administrator. I like this chivalry, although it says he's military-minded. So, again, a nice general to have. And then we also have Demetrios here, and he's a very good general. And if you notice, he has a different bodyguard. He actually has these Paramonoi foot guards who are very good instead of the standard cavalry bodyguard. So that could be a nice general to put into a city for the defense. What I did in my campaign is I just made him the governor of Constantinople, and I gave him some good retinue. He built up the traits, and that just automatically gives you 152 excellent infantry to help the defense, because in defending cities, infantry is typically much better than cavalry. So I think that's enough about Constantinople up here. We also have a nice little foothold up here at Mesembria. Now, this is not a very secure location. We have a couple very low-tier units, a fairly good general, but he's not loyal at all, so be careful of that. And it's also not well built up. So we can build a few peasant tier units, but it is so isolated and far from Constantinople that I would not attempt to hold this position at all. The Turks are all around it in Bulgaria. They will attack it very quickly, and in every game I've played, the Byzantines have lost Mesembria almost immediately. I take that back. I think I've seen one or two games where they held onto it for a little while, but they do eventually, inevitably lose that city. So, what should we do with it? Well, one of the things I learned that I do every time I play as the Byzantines now is I would much rather have this settlement of Galatia over here, which is a citadel, which are pretty rare. And so what I like to do is send my diplomat over right away before I do anything. And with my allies, the Genoese, I offer them my city of Mesembria, and I ask for the city of Galatia. Now, they typically will not take this, but if we offer them a little bit of money, and I know money is tight, but this is worth it, at least in my opinion. If we offer them this, they will accept, and suddenly we're in such a better defensive position. We have two settlements here, and this is much easier to defend because they're here on the peninsula. And Pera is a very nice fortress. It's got some great drill squares and archery facilities, and we will need to set up our government here, but so much better. And then this forces the Genoese to defend this instead of us, which could also pull them into a war against the Ottomans, which helps us because the more factions that are fighting the Ottomans, the better. It makes it somewhat easier. And then we can move down these guys as reinforcements. Anyway, that is just something I like to do as the Byzantine or the Roman Empire right from turn one. It just makes things a little bit easier. But let's continue to see what other places we hold, because we do have more in the Empire. Down here, we have a small... I don't remember the name of this island, actually. Is it that? I can't remember. We do have a small island. It's not a great settlement. We can get a few troops here, but we only have some trash militia tier units holding it. We do have a pretty decent general once his loyalty is fixed. but be careful with this island because it's typically attacked very quickly, either by the Venetians or the Ottomans, or most likely the Knights Hospitaller. They love to attack you if you own any of these islands, whether you're the Venetians or the Genoese or the Romans. The Knights Hospitaller forget their long war against the Muslim Turks and will attack you. So do be mindful of that. It might be good to give this island away, maybe for some money, or if you want to hold it, just be ready for a fight. So that's that. And then down here, we have our Marian Peninsula, and this is definitely where our strength is for the time being. So we have 4 settlements down here. Mistras is definitely our best settlement. We have a great general up here, and we have a nice half-stack army, which is, it's okay. It's got some okay early units, but we do have access to some great cavalry, and once we build this up, once we have the money, it can be a great fortress to start churning out troops. We also have Corinth up here with another very good general, some units, nothing too great. And then we have the fort here, I believe this is a canal. I've actually been here, the canal that connects these two bodies of water, and there's also a defensive wall built here to hold off any invaders. So pretty cool that this is a fort in the game. We also have a general here. He's pretty good. In my campaign, as we'll see later, I think he's still alive. He was actually one of my best generals in the game. Helped me win a lot of land back. We've got a couple other fortresses lying around. It gives you one free unit of upkeep, which is nice. And then we have 2 settlements up here. Again, nothing special with the militia, but you do have some generals who could be good. Nothing too special with these settlements. They're not too well built up, and this is an interesting part of the map. In all of my games, regardless of what faction I play as, I don't make much money here on this Marian Peninsula. I don't know what it is. It's probably because my capital is never too close, and so the corruption is up. But this is not a great portion of the map. You're going to want to expand outward once the initial onslaughts are done. If we toggle off the Fog of War, we can see that the Venetians also have a foothold here, and they have some excellent troops there. So if you want to kick them off the peninsula, be ready for a bit of a fight. They also have a couple forts here, very near or on top of your land, but they're going to be busy for the time being before they go after you, but you'll probably bump heads with them eventually. So, speaking of your neighbors, let's take a look at your neighbors. We'll start down here. So, over here, the Florentines actually start with Athens, and they have a couple forts here, and about a half-stack army garrison in Athens. And if we go over there, let's take a look. They've got some decent units. The Navarrese infantry are actually halfway good. So, again, they only have 1 settlement here. Everything else is over in Italy. So it might be worth it to just kick them out as fast as possible and take Athens. Athens is a great settlement to have, and you also do need to have it to win. But at the same time, they could just serve as a buffer against the Ottomans and whatnot against you. So kind of up to you. They could also be an ally potentially, although I don't think they would accept that. Oh, they did accept it. Okay, well, yeah, so you could form an alliance with Florence if you want. But yeah, they only hold Athens, so typically they're dealing with other people, although I have seen Florence and the Byzantines battle it out quite a bit too. To the west, we have Epirus. They have 3 settlements here. You do not have great relations with them. Obviously, they want your land here, and historically, Epirus did once belong to the Romans, obviously. So you'll probably go to war eventually with them, but they have their hands completely full with the Ottomans, because this Ottoman army right here usually attacks Epirus right away, and like you, they are in a war for survival against the Turks. So maybe you can put aside your differences and ally together. Who knows? To the north, way up here, they're not really your neighbor, but I wanted to give them a shout out. The Albanians here, they think very highly of you, and they are also fighting a war of survival against the Ottomans, so they could definitely be a possible ally. And similarly, the Serbians are your Orthodox brothers, and although you've bumped heads with them many, many times in the past, you now have the Ottoman enemy as your common enemy, and the Serbians could definitely be the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, so yeah, keep that in mind. And in the Aegean Sea, scattered across the islands, you have two neighbors. We have the Venetians. They're over here on Corfu. They have, like we said, Modon down here. And then the jewel of their empire is Crete down here. Crete is a very good settlement. Some great mercenaries. A lot of money comes from Crete. So that is kind of their stronghold here in their mercantile empire. And then they are up here in Naxos and over here as well on Eobia. I can't remember how you say it, but they're up here. So the Venetians kind of surround you. Obviously, they are historically your enemy, but then again, the Byzantines were allied with them at certain points in time. Things change like that. But I would recommend, once you survive the initial onslaught from the Ottomans, maybe make peace with the Ottomans and start kind of snatching up these islands to rebuild your economy, limit your enemies, and then once you're rebuilt, then push back against the Ottomans. That's what I would do, but again, obviously it's up to you. Over here, similarly, we have the Knights of Rhodes, the Hospitallers, and they're over in Rhodes with a small foothold on Anatolia. And although they start at war with the Ottomans, more often than not, they make peace with them and even ally with the Ottomans. And then they expand outwards against Christian lands, which, I don't know, it doesn't really make sense historically, but it is how this mod tends to work. And more often than not, what this means is they will start landing their armies on these different islands and building kind of a maritime empire. So you definitely need to watch out for them. They will probably attack you, and they will probably attack you pretty soon in the game. So just be mindful of them. Again, they do love to snatch up these islands. So maybe let them, maybe spend your time and effort fighting elsewhere, but kind of depends what they decide to do. Similarly, another neighbor of yours is the Genoese, your allies, and they, of course, start with Galatia or Pera here, which we just gave away, but they do have that. They have a small presence here in northern Anatolia, and then they have Lesbos and Chios down here, these two islands. So they're not going to be able to help you too much, but they are here, and in my campaign, I kept them as my ally the entire game, and there were a few moments where they were able to help a little bit, is kind of a distraction against my enemies. So, very nice to have. Again, your allies are few and far between. You don't start with Florence as an ally, we just did that. But yeah, the Genoese I would try and keep as an ally as long as possible. If you do want to kick them out of Greece and Anatolia, obviously you can win this land back from the Italians, but with how much the world hates you, maybe it's better to keep them as your allies. And then, last but not least, the last neighbor you have are the Ottomans. And I will keep this short. You are completely surrounded by the Ottoman Empire. They are infinitely more stronger than you, more wealthier, and more advanced. And they have a significant presence in Anatolia. They do tend to be distracted with the other beyliks and Muslim principalities in Anatolia, but very strong here, and they're most significant presence, I would say, is in Europe, where you would want to expand. So through Macedonia, northern Greece, into Thessaly, and then up into Thrace and Bulgaria. They have some huge armies and a lot of money. So the Ottomans are obviously public enemy number one for you as the Roman Empire, and they are going to be throwing everything they have at you pretty much throughout the entire campaign. So, yeah, there's a little bit of encouragement for you there. Alright, what else? I think that covers a lot of it. As far as expansion, there are really no rebel settlements near you to expand into. You could come up here into the Principality of Theodoro on the Crimean Peninsula, but honestly, I don't think that'd be worth it. It's not a great settlement. It has a huge garrison, and then this would probably cause the Crimean Khanate to try and attack you. And that's just another war, another front that's really not worth it. As far as other rebel settlements you could expand into, over here in Cyprus, this is held by the Kingdom of Cyprus, which is the kind of the last foothold of the Outremer Crusaders. But again, it's a good fortress, but it's not the richest, and it has a very good defensive garrison. So just not worth it, in my opinion. For expansion, you really have two options. Do you want to push against the Turks as hard as possible, or do you want to make peace with the Turks and attack some of the more European powers that have taken a lot of bites out of your lands? Or do you want to just play the long defensive game and kind of just hole up and wait it out? It's up to you. What I would recommend is fight the Turks for a little bit, push against them as much as you can right off the bat. They don't have a ton of units right here, so you might be able to take one or two settlements before they can get reinforcements here, which could be nice. And I would hold off expanding into Thessaly, let them battle it out, let Epirus and the Albanians and the Turks and the Florentines, let them battle it out. Just focus on building up Maria to have some sort of economy, be able to train some sort of units, and then I would expand outward into the Aegean Sea, build up a navy, and win back a lot of these islands. Just be wary of the Hospitallers, because they will obviously not like that, and will definitely bump heads with you over that. So be careful. And then in the late game, once you have some sort of economy, you're going to have to take the fight to the Turks. And I would say what I did is I had a two-front war in Anatolia going on. I came up through the Aegean Sea, through Rhodes, and then I crossed the Dardanelles as well. And that was able to be somewhat successful. And then once I had a nice kingdom in Anatolia, that's when I focused back on Greece and Macedonia and Bulgaria and whatnot. And yeah, it's kind of an interesting campaign because there's so much you can do, and you're going to be fighting an uphill battle pretty much the entire campaign. So if that's the kind of campaign you enjoy, you'll definitely enjoy fighting as the Romans. But yes. Last but not least, let's go over a few of the scripts. Like I said, in 1453, there will be some Ottoman Empire armies that will spawn and attack Constantinople, but you do get a few warnings ahead of time, and you also get, if you accept, a few Genoese reinforcements. So you get a great Genoese general, including some of the famed Genoese crossbowmen. So that's nice as just an extra little bonus to help fight, to win back, well, not win back, but to fight off the Turks from the Theodosian walls. And for the actual defense, I would say you really just need a lot of troops, and you need a lot of good troops. So get those Varangian guards, get your fire throwers, and get any sort of unit that can lay down stakes. Those stakes will save you in combat. Just put them in the street, put them behind the gates, and watch the Turkish horsemen die in droves. So that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to give away too much, but it is a fun battle. I've played it a few times, and it is definitely winnable as the Romans. You can definitely win it. As far as other scripts go, there is the Albanian revolt in Morea. I can't remember what year it happens, but a couple of full stack rebel armies will appear, and this was historical. This was a lot of Albanian civilians and peasants living down here were taxed very heavily by the Byzantine Empire, and they broke into revolt. It happens actually pretty early on in the game because historically the Byzantines were just leveraging as many taxes as possible to prepare for the defense. So do be mindful of that. Typically they'll leave you alone, but they will ravage the countryside, which means that all of these cities are going to be making a lot less money. And I want to say there's also another big script I'm forgetting about, but I cannot remember it. So that's about that. And if we want to look at the Roman titles, I don't know if I've gone over this in my other campaign overviews, I can't remember. But one of the neat things with this mod is you can earn these titles for your different characters, and they give all sorts of benefits and bonuses. So obviously with the Roman Empire, there's a precedent for your control of half of this map, or most of this map. So there's all sorts of titles and themes that you can earn with all of their own benefits. So if we look at this guy right here, right now he has this retinue, which is basically he's the governor of Constantinople and gives all these tax benefits and command benefits and whatnot, and that's basically what these Roman titles are. And there's plenty of them to go around, because once you survive the Ottoman attack, it is time to rebuild the Roman Empire, and that can be quite a lot of fun. Let's see. I think I covered most things. Money expansion, yeah, okay. So let's jump into the battlefield and take a look at the Roman roster. Okay, so here we are on the battle map, and the Byzantine roster is very extensive. There's a lot of units I want to cover. There's a lot of unique units for the Romans, and then they also have access to all sorts of militia and mercenary units. So I want to cover a lot of them today. So I have split this into first any unit that fights on foot, including some regional and mercenary units, which we'll get to, and then I will go reload with the cavalry. So starting off, we have our worst unit, and that is these guys right here, the Town Watch, and they are your peasant spearmen who are usually just forced into combat, and as such they are pretty terrible. Attack of 1, charge of 2, and total defense of 7. So very, very terrible. They will die very quickly, they will rout very quickly. They do have that bonus fighting cavalry and combat bonus in woods, but pretty terrible. They are meant to garrison settlements and take the hits away from your better units, and they're cheap, they're easy to train, but there's really nothing special to say about them. And let's move on. And similarly, we have these peasant javelin men, and I would say they are just as basically worthless as your other spearmen. I say worthless, but that's not true. Every unit has a purpose, and these guys actually do have a much better use than the spearmen we just went over, and that is because javelin men are always powerful, and that one melee attack is nothing to be happy about. Total offensive 5 means anything will kill them, but a 9 missile attack is actually quite good, especially for how cheap these units are. 180, that is nothing. That won't hurt your economy at all. Their upkeep, I want to say, is like 66. It's very, very cheap. So I would definitely recommend getting these units, especially if you have to get a quick defense going in a city or a castle or whatnot, because positioned behind your main spearmen, they can actually get a lot of kills with that missile attack. They do have poor morale though, so they will rout very easily, and they're terrible in the melee, and any missile fire will devastate them, but that javelin is quite useful. Moving on, we have another peasant unit, and that is the peasant archers. And just like we've covered so many times, they are archers, so they can put down a little bit of fire with that 2 missile attack, but a melee attack of 1, a total defense of 2 is just terrible. They're really bad, but they're cheap. So if you need some extra arrows in the sky, you can pick them up, and they're about as expensive as these other peasant units and have a very low upkeep. So again, yeah, I've given these guys a hard time, but they're peasant units. That is their job. If you expect anything more from them, then you're being unfair, because they're peasants, they're farmers, they've never been given any training in combat, and they're forced away from their homes to fight, so you gotta take what you can get with them. So now we get to kind of your more professional troops, I would say, starting off with these spearmen. And you can train these spearmen as a lot of different factions. A lot of these units you can, actually, because they're regional troops. So if you take over a region in, say, the Balkans, you can usually train these guys. And similarly, you can actually train these guys as other factions, but they are a Roman unit originally. So they're certainly better than your first peasant spearman unit, but they're not great. I would say they're a little bit below average. Yeah, it says they're still militia quality. A 2 attack, 2 charge bonus, that's not great. They are spearmen, so don't expect too much with that. Total offensive 12 is decent. They will be able to hold the line a little bit. Bonus fighting cavalry is good, combat bonus in woods is good, but they don't have great morale, they don't have good stamina, nothing like that. So, again, nothing too special, but I will say that they are pretty cheap. Recruitment cost of 450 is quite nice. I believe their upkeep is like 132 or something like that. So they're a very cheap spear unit that will be able to hold the line for a little bit. Now, in the later game, they're going to falter for sure, but I actually use these guys quite a bit in my Byzantine armies, just because they're very easy to get access to, and they're very good for holding the line in the early game, while your more elite units do the killing and the flanking and whatnot. And they also get free upkeep, so that is quite nice. And like I said, they're very easy to train. You can train them from both cities and fortresses all across your empire, so that is pretty nice. And similarly, the Toxotai or Toxotai are your kind of your main archers, and they're not good. I take that back. I'm being too harsh on these guys, but that's only because I'm so excited about these later units. They're fine. These archers are fine. They're very, very average, but for militia quality archers, they're okay. Melee attack of 2 is nothing great, but a missile attack of 4 is halfway decent. I would say a 5 is about average for bowmen, so yeah, they're a little subpar, but total defense of 12 is actually okay. That means they can take a few hits. And like the spearmen we just covered, they're cheap. You can get them anywhere in your empire very easily, and if you need more arrows in the sky, they're a halfway decent option for you. So in a lot of your early armies, it's going to be consisting of a lot of these 2 units, and if you watch that no morale, or I should say like average militia morale, if you watch that, they will perform okay. Just, you have to babysit them pretty closely, but with that, I will say that they look very cool. I do love the Greek and Roman types of armor that a lot of these units are wearing, and they also get free upkeep in basically any settlement that you can train them in. So, a halfway decent unit, but nothing to write home about. However, our next unit I have written home about, and my parents knew nothing about what I was talking about, but that is the Peltast Javelin Men, and I love this unit. This is one of my favorite Roman units, and Again, they don't look like they have too much going for them. They're definitely better than the units we just covered, but a 13 defense is not great. A 4 melee attack is also not great, but good morale, good stamina. Both of those are very nice. Recruitment cost of 600 is pretty cheap. Their upkeep is, again, I can't remember it offhand. It's like 140, 160 or something, but pretty cheap. And the missile attack of 14 is devastating. These guys will absolutely destroy with their javelins. And because of that, I always recommend training these guys. Even in the late game, they can get tons of kills, and they are very easy to get a hold of. You can recruit them all over your empire from cities and possibly from forts as well, although I would have to double check that. But yeah, this is a great unit. Don't feel bad ever about recruiting them. They will surprise you with this 14. I mean, that's really high for javelins. And javelins, I believe, also get a bonus against cavalry. So if you're able to throw a few of these into the enemy cavalry, you will not be disappointed. All right, moving on. Speaking of disappointed, we have a unit here which, on paper, it looks great, but I can't help but get a little disappointed with them. Not a unit I hate, definitely not a unit I hate, but a unit I'm a little disappointed with. So first, looking at them, they look amazing with these blue tunics and these kind of like Morning Star maces they have. I love how this unit works, or how it looks, these Marines. And being Marines, I believe you can only recruit them in Greek regions that are coastal regions as well. So they are a little hard to get a hold of, and they do take 3 turns to recruit, which is a little annoying, but that's just how it works in this mod, which is totally fine. And let's look at what they have. Abilities at a glance. Effective against armor, very nice. They have these maces, which gives them that bonus. Excellent morale, love to see that. And good stamina as well. Stamina is always very much appreciated for melee infantry, and these guys will fight for quite a while. Total defense of 20 is very nice. 11 of that is armor, so all of that is solid. Charge bonus of 3 is, I'd say, about average. Then an attack of 3, and this is where my disappointment comes in, because looking at them, they look awesome. They are professional troops, but the 3 attack, it just hurts. And I've had a lot of these guys, I've had a lot of battles where these guys just don't get as many kills as I would like them to because of that 3. Now, it is effective against armor, and obviously this does go up with experience, but the 3 just holds them back a little bit from being a great unit in my mind. Still, with that said, a very good unit. I will train them whenever I can, and they disappoint a little bit, but they are still deadly in the right hands. Alright, I'll be right back, and then let's move on to the other units you have. Okay, sorry about that. Now, jumping back into this, we can get to our more professional troops. I mean, the Marines are definitely professional troops, but other than that, yes, let's get into our other professional troops as the Romans. And first, we get to our swordsmen. So these are basically your main line infantry, the next 2 units. You get the swordsmen and the spearmen. And both of these units are good. I would say they are possibly even very good, depending on how you use them. But they don't match up against a lot of your adversaries. The Ottomans and the European factions will outclass you with both swordsmen and spearmen, so you do have to be careful with that. But that being said, these units are quite good. So looking at the swordsmen, they have excellent morale. I would like to have some good stamina there, but alas, we do not have it. Attack of 5 for swordsmen is pretty average. Charge bonus of 4 is pretty good, though. That's definitely a bonus there. And a total defense of 23 is certainly respectable. And if you look at these guys, I love it. They have these rectangle-style shields, which kind of harkens back to the Romans of antiquity in a way. And I really do love their design. I love these kind of scimitar-like swords that some of them are wearing or holding. And yeah, just a beautiful unit. And other than that, there's not much to say about them. They are a little difficult to get a hold of. You need a fortress and a citadel, and the barracks built up. And then they do take 3 turns to recruit, so that takes a while. But once you're able to pump these guys out, they'll do a good job at holding the line. But they're probably not going to win battles on their own. You're going to need some support with them. And similarly, that we have their brother counterpart, and that is the Scutatoi spearmen, and very similar to the swordsmen. Excellent morale, can make shield wall, which is interesting. If we do that right now, you can see they're very tightly packed, and the shield wall is something I would love to see more in this mod. I think this might even be the only unit that can make the shield wall. And it's a neat ability that's in Medieval 2, which helps to kind of stop cavalry charges and infantry from pushing through them more easily. So yeah, a neat ability that is present here with these spearmen. They obviously look amazing, similar design. And a 4 attack for spears is actually pretty good, and a charge bonus of 4 is very good as well. So yeah, definitely 2 units that are good. I prefer the spearmen a little bit more just because of that ability, but I do train both of them pretty much as often as I can, or as often as my economy allows it with the Byzantines. Both units take 3 turns to create, but yeah, they're good. They're very good. Reliable, but yeah, you're going to need other units to win you the battle. So moving on, we have another interesting unit. We're actually getting into some very unique and interesting units for the Byzantines. So first, we actually have a polearm or pike unit, and this is a unit that is almost a bit fictional in a way, because the Romans kind of steered away from the pikes in their later military history, and really pikes took off after 1453. I mean, the Swiss had been using them before then, as well as a few other people, but the Romans never really embraced pikes. So they did in a few cases, but not to the extent that Western and Central Europe was. So I do love that they added this unit into the game as kind of a, if Constantinople didn't fall, would we see the Romans adopt pikes almost? And because of that, a very neat unit. Now, their stats aren't wonderful, but I actually was surprised by them in my campaign. They actually did very well for their stats being so low. So if we do look at their abilities, can form a spear wall, bonus fighting cavalry, good morale, and very long spears. Yeah, that's all pretty typical for pikemen. Their job is to stop cavalry in their tracks. Attack of 2 is very low, but for pikes, that doesn't really matter as much because they can kind of stun lock the enemy in place and then keep poking them with the pikes. So the 2 doesn't really matter. Charge bonus of 4, that also doesn't really matter because pikemen are kind of glitchy with charging, and you're going to want to keep them in formation anyway. Total defense of 10 is pretty low for pikemen, especially late era pikemen. But 9 of that is armor, and that's pretty high. So they will do pretty well, actually. Now, they are locked behind an event. You will have to wait a bit into the mid-game, I would say, before they are unlocked. But once you do, yeah, I would recommend picking a few of them up, especially if your playstyle is aimed more towards pikes. They're okay. They're definitely okay. They're not the best pikemen in the game, not even close. But for a faction that has no other pole arms, these guys are going to have to be sufficient enough. And I would say they are. They're a good unit. And their design is next level. I love their design, and I love these long kind of kite shields on their back. I wish they got a little bit of a bonus from that, but they don't in the stats. That's okay. I do love how these guys look. All right, moving on. The Romans do have some very good missile units, and starting that off, we actually have these crossbowmen. I want to say these are more Central Europeans who are fighting for the Romans or who have lived in Roman lands for a while, although that might be, maybe not. Okay, I don't know. I'd have to read into that again, and I don't want to do that, but They're just kind of halfway decent crossbowmen. Nothing spectacular, but they will fill your crossbow void. So long-range missiles, that's great. Missile attack of 8 it's okay for crossbows. Nothing spectacular, but it's okay. Total defense of 9 is not wonderful. Melee attack of 3 is fine, but they're a militia unit, so they do get free upkeep. And for being a militia unit, they're definitely halfway decent just because of that long-range missile of 8. And they're also very cheap. Recruitment cost of 480. I want to say their upkeep is also about 200 or a little less than 200. So if you need some long-range missiles, don't feel bad about throwing some of these guys into your armies because they'll definitely pick up a few kills. But that's pretty much all I have to say about them. And then we get to the Mortatoi Guard Archers, and these are your elite archer unit, and they are quite excellent, I will say. So, first of all, they do have the ability to lay those stakes, which can destroy cavalry in their tracks. Very valuable ability, and quite rare in this mod, so anytime you get it, you're going to want to use it. If we look at their other stats, good morale, good stamina, long-range missiles, that's all awesome for archers. Melee attack of 3 is not wonderful, but that missile attack of 6 is above average for archers. So definitely worthwhile. And it says that they have long-range missiles. They have really long-range missiles. These guys can shoot very far. And because of that, they're just fantastic. They do take a few turns to recruit. I want to say 3 or 4 turns. I can't remember. Total defense of 19 is very nice. Armor 11, very good. They're just a fantastic archer unit. And for being an elite archer unit, they're actually fairly easy to get a hold of. In the mid to late game, I would say. Once you have your best archery ranges built, you can train these guys pretty much all over your empire. So it does take some time to get a hold of them, but once you do, have 4, 5, or 6 of them in your armies, and you'll get tons and tons of kills. And these stake abilities will keep you safe from cavalry. So a great unit. They're also not too expensive to upkeep. I want to say it's like 350 or something. Could be wrong on that, though. I can't remember. I should have written this down, but I did not, alas. Now we get to some of your elite unique units that are only available to the Byzantines. And first, of course, we have the... I'm not going to say that's... I'll try it. Siphonatores. Your Greek flamethrowers. And these guys are next level. If you're familiar with the Medieval 2 base game, these guys were basically, their prototype was created in the Crusades expansion, and if you're not familiar, they basically have a flamethrower, and it destroys anything and everything in its path. And because of that, they are one of the best units in the game. Total defense of 22 is very nice. Armor 10, shield 4, excellent morale, good stamina, effective against armor, flamethrowers typically are, and frighten nearby enemy. Everyone is terrified of being burned alive, and their missile attack of 7, that doesn't matter. It destroys everything. Nothing can survive its blast. It's so deadly, and I train these guys as often as you can, and it's hard to get a hold of them. They can only be trained from Constantinople, so if you lose the Holy City, you will not be able to train them, but you do start with one of them at the beginning of the game, and you can train them every 20 turns or so. You get another one, and I would say as soon as they're available, train them, because you want to use them as much as you can in your campaign, because they are that incredible. Similarly, we also have the Paramanoi foot guards, and this is actually what one of your generals starts with as his bodyguard, which we took a look at. And these guys are just elite footmen. Attack of 5 is okay. However, being that it is effective against armor, that's actually quite good. Charge bonus of 3 is average. Total defense of 25 is pretty good. And they inspire nearby troops, which is very nice. So if you have these guys behind some of your more militia tier units, they will fight better and will fight longer than if these guys were not there. Good stamina and excellent morale means they will fight for a long time. These are one of your elite units. These are some of your finest soldiers in your empire, and they will typically not let you down. And they have a great design as well. I like that some of them are using maces while others are using swords, but they are all of them veteran warriors and the finest available to you, or maybe second to finest, as we'll discuss in just a second. But I think they're only available in 2 cities, Thessalonica and Constantinople, so it is difficult to get a hold of them, and I want to say they're behind a script wall as well, but it might just be a later game unit that before they're available. I can't remember, but yeah, they're a bit hard to get a hold of, but once you do, they are quite deadly. And speaking of unique units that are quite deadly, we of course have the Varangian Guard, because these are the most famous of Roman soldiers, or Byzantine soldiers, I should say. And these are Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon men who have come to the Byzantine Empire to serve the emperor as mercenaries, and they are the finest warriors available to you, at least on foot. And they're just incredible. Inspires nearby troops, bonus fighting cavalry, effective against armor, frighten nearby enemy infantry, excellent morale, and very good stamina. Very good stamina is so rare in this mod, and of course the Varangian Guard have it. They are just the best. Attack of 11 is absolutely devastating, especially because they have a bonus against cavalry and armor. That's just kind of insane. Charge bonus of 5 is very good. Total defense of 27 is excellent, and they look amazing. They've got these like two-handed Zweihander type swords. They've got their, of course, the infamous Varangian axes, and they will not disappoint. These guys are phenomenal. You can throw them against pretty much anything, and they will do very well. The only downside is that they're very hard to get a hold of. They are a bit expensive, and you can only train them in Constantinople, so do not lose that city at all costs, because that's where your best units come from. And I want to say they're only available every 20 turns or something like that, so it is a bit of a pain to recruit them, but when you have them, they will work their wonders. And yeah, one of my favorite units in the game, without a doubt. All right, moving on, I wanted to kind of mention a few mercenary units. So first of all, the Vlach warriors are... These guys are definitely not limited to the Romans. You can train them as any faction in the region, and they're available all the way through Greece, through Serbia, through Bulgaria, through a lot of the Balkan regions, and they are basically a peasant tier spear unit, at least from surface level, but they're actually one of my favorite units in the game, and let me explain why. They just have a whole host of things going for them. So all of these abilities, let's look at this, can do Schildtrum, which is nice. That's when they form a kind of a circle of spears, defensive spears, to protect against any angle. They can hide in long grass, which they were just doing a second ago. They bonus fighting cavalry, of course, because of their spears. Combat bonus in woods. May charge without orders. That's not really a problem. Good morale is nice, and very good stamina. Again, that's pretty rare for any foot soldiers, so very valuable there. And attack of 5 is very good for spearmen, especially cheap spearmen. Charge bonus of 4 is also very good for spearmen. Total defense of 12 is low, but again, these are cheap peasant spearmen, essentially. So 12 is actually pretty good. And then on top of all of that, they get free upkeep in certain settlements, and they are dirt cheap. I want to say it's like 130 upkeep and maybe 300 recruitment cost. So they cost nothing at all. And for nothing at all, or barely any money, you get all of this, which is some really just excellent stats. So I wanted to include them Obviously, they're available for any faction, but I decided to cover them now with the Romans because I pick up these mercenaries whenever I see them available, just because for the money they are quite excellent. And then a few other mercenary units that you'll probably come across with your Roman campaigns. First of all, the Cretan archers. We covered them when we looked at the Venetian roster, and they are just an excellent archer unit, one of the best in the game. They have that good morale, or excellent morale, good stamina, long-range missiles. They can lay down the sharpened stakes, and they have a missile attack of 7, which is just excellent. They're okay in the melee. They have a great defense of 17, and they are recruitable either in Constantinople or in Crete. So you can actually train them from Constantinople or the region around Constantinople after turn 10 or 11 or so. So another great unit to get your hands on. And similarly, we also have the Genoese Pavese crossbowmen. As the Romans, if you want more crossbow units, and these guys aren't cutting it for you, you do have access to Genoese Pavese crossbowmen, and they're just a phenomenal crossbow unit. Good morale, good stamina, long-range missiles. They can use those sharpened stakes, which are nice. Melee attack of 5 is actually halfway decent. Total defense of 23 is very good, and a missile attack of 11 is very deadly. So definitely a great unit to pick up. You do get a few of these guys offered to you right before the Ottomans attack you if you have scripts enabled. And I would definitely agree to that because these crossbowmen will get a lot of kills. The only thing that I have against these guys is their upkeep is about 500, which is very pricey. So do watch out for that. But if you have them and you want to keep them, maybe throw them in a few forts, pull them out when you need to, and they will not disappoint. And finally, the biggest weakness of the Romans is they lack gunpowder. They do have a few options. They have access to the basic cannons and whatnot, but they don't have good handgunner units, and all of your neighbors will have access to better units than you. So that is probably your biggest roster weakness as the Romans. And your main handgunning unit probably is going to be these Latin handgunner mercenaries. And they're definitely okay. They're not the worst. Good morale is nice. Missile attack of 17 is very deadly, especially since it's a handgun unit. And total defense of 14 is halfway decent, especially since 9 of that is armor. So you will have access to these guys all throughout your empire, and don't feel bad about recruiting them. They're probably your only handgun unit, or I shouldn't say that, but they're going to be your most accessible handgunning unit, and they'll do a good job. Now, if you come across any Janissary musketeers or units like that, you're going to want to pick a different strategy. But in the early game, mid game, these guys they'll definitely do their job. So that's pretty much it, I think, for foot units. Now let's jump into the cavalry. Alright, so here we are with the cavalry for the Roman Empire, and I would definitely say that the cavalry is a strength of the Romans in that you don't have the best cavalry in the world. The Ottomans will definitely outclass you, but you do have access to quite a lot of cavalry units that are good, if not superb. So, starting off with the General's Bodyguard, we have the General's Bodyguard, and these guys are very good. They're definitely one of the better General Bodyguard, and we can see that with inspires nearby troops, powerful charge, excellent morale. All of that is pretty typical. Charge attack of 3, attack of 3 with their spears, 11 charge bonus is pretty good for a charge, and total defense of 33 is very good. In the very late game, that will suffer a little bit as more heavy cavalry is in the late 30s, or I should say high 30s, sometimes even 40 or so. But these guys will definitely be up there as some of the best cavalry on the battlefield. The only problem is you do only get a few of them because they are a bodyguard, but they are an excellent bodyguard. And as a secondary, they have a mace with an attack of 5, I believe. Yes, a 5 attack of mace, which is pretty good, effective against armor, and that means that they will do pretty good in the melee attack and to be able to kill some heavily armored units. So again, not much more to say about them. They're a great general's bodyguard. They look fantastic with this lamellar armor on them and their mounts. So I love to see that. Now let's get into a very interesting unit, and that is the Viglai Hipais or something like that. They are peasants on horseback, and I really like this unit. They are very surprising. The first time I played as the Romans, I never bothered using these guys, and that was a huge mistake. So if we look at their stats, it doesn't look great. An attack of 2 is nothing wonderful. As a secondary, they do have an axe, which means it's armor piercing, but only an attack of 3. So not great. It's okay. But that total defense of 3 is horrendous. They don't have any armor. They don't have any defense skill. 3 means that anything will kill them so quickly. And they don't have good stamina. They don't have good morale. And because of those reasons, I never recruited these guys. Big mistake. Because they have 2 huge things going for them. Yes, their defense is terrible, but the charge bonus of 15 is incredible. If we just look back at our general's bodyguard, it's 4 points higher charge bonus, which is insane. And being that they aren't heavily armored, they're a little bit faster than some of the other more armored units, so they can move around the battlefield very quickly. And yes, their defense is terrible. They don't have any good abilities, but that charge bonus is wonderful, and they are basically free. Their recruitment cost is 480 or so, although I've seen less, so I don't know what that means. But their upkeep is only 137, meaning they are a militia tier unit essentially, but they have some aces up their sleeve with that charge bonus. So if you keep them out of enemy fire and use them to flank the enemy, they can work wonders. They're just a fantastic unit that is really surprising. So yeah, keep that in mind. They're also very easy to get a hold of. They're easy to train, so just a great unit. You won't want to rely on them, but as kind of a wild card unit, maybe have 1 or 2 of them in your armies just to see if you can get around the flanks or to charge down skirmishers or routing units. These guys will definitely do that job well. And now we get into your professional cavalry contingents, and you definitely have a few options. So the lowest tier are the these lancers, and they're good. They're not great, but they're definitely good. So good morale, powerful charge, that's nice. Charge bonus of 11 is pretty good. Total defense of 16 is solid, meaning they can take a few hits before they die. And that's pretty much it. I mean, they do get free upkeep in the right buildings, but they don't have anything too special going for them. As a secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 6, which is about average for cavalry, I would say. And yeah, I would say this is probably the most average cavalry unit there is, and I should really judge everything based off of these guys, because they're pretty average, and for the price, they're not terrible. They have an upkeep of 283 or so, which is actually a little on the cheaper end, I would say, for melee cavalry. So they do have that going for them, and they're also pretty easy to get a hold of in your different settlements. So a good unit, and one I will probably judge other units based on, because they're really just middle of the road, I would say. But I don't have much negative things to say about them. I do prefer their upgrade though, which are the I'm gonna try it. Cavaloroi. That was terrible. I don't know. These Lancers. And they're just a direct upgrade in every way. So, good morale, powerful charge for the Lancers we just covered. These guys have excellent morale, powerful charge. Yeah, they may charge without orders, but that really doesn't play out too much in my experience. Instead of a charge of 11, these guys have a charge of 17, which is the highest we have seen yet in this roster. That is absolutely devastating. And then instead of a 16 defense, they have a 20 defense. And I love this unit. This is my go-to cavalry unit when I play as the Byzantines, because there are better options for cavalry, but they are more expensive, as we'll see in a little bit. Whereas these guys, they are more expensive than the first tier of Lancers. So instead of a 280 upkeep, these guys have a 380 upkeep. But for that extra 100, you're getting 6 more points in charge bonus, 4 more points in defense, and instead of good morale, you have excellent morale. And all of that combined just means that these guys are one of my favorite cavalry units. There we go. And as their secondary, they have a sword, and instead of a 6 attack, as these guys had, these Lancers have an 8 attack. So a great unit. And they do get free upkeep in the respective buildings. It says here that they're only available in Greek regions, and I think that is true, but there are a lot of Greek regions that kind of stretches across much of the map in Greece and Bulgaria and even in parts of Anatolia, I believe. So, pretty easy to get a hold of them, and they will not disappoint. They're just a very good heavy cavalry. They will be outclassed by your enemies later on in the game, but they definitely win in the looks department because their design is fantastic. I love the feathered helmets here with kind of these eye holes in the mail. Love it. Now, you do have some even better cavalry than these guys, and this would be your Dynatoi nobles, and these are your elite noble cavalry. They are your feudal units, or one of your feudal units. So yes, low availability but free upkeep, and that's all definitely true. Excellent morale, powerful charge. So their charge is not as good as the Lancers we just covered. It goes back down to 11, but instead of a defense of 20, they have a defense of 26. Now, yeah, that is pretty good, but it will definitely not match up with late game European or Ottoman units because it is still in the 20s. So be mindful of that. Although these are your nobles, they are not as good as your neighbors. And the one thing I would say about these guys is they do have a mace as their secondary. So again, you get that bonus armor piercing element, and it has an attack of 5, which is it's good. But yeah, for the price, which I haven't mentioned yet, but it is expensive, 1,270 recruitment, and then 500 upkeep. For the price, I would much rather save my money and go back to these Lancers, because yes, although the nobles are better, the Lancers are still very good, and they save you a significant amount of money. But still, the nobles are a great unit. I definitely do train them, although I try and keep them in my cities for that free upkeep. And yeah, I don't want to sell them short. They are a phenomenal unit, but they do suffer in the late game. And then finally, you do get a unique unit, and that is the Paramonoi Hippeis Guards, or something along those lines. And this is a unique unit. You can only recruit them in Constantinople or Thessalonica, I guess, but I don't know if that's right, because I don't think I could train them in Thessalonica. I can't remember. But needless to say, they are quite rare. They take quite a few turns to recruit. I want to say 5 turns to recruit, or something like that. But they are excellent. So you can see that they're just a direct upgrade in every way. You have that powerful charge, excellent morale. They inspire nearby troops, which is great. Charge bonus of 11 is pretty standard. It's kind of what we've seen with a lot of these units. Total defense of 30, though, means that they will be able to stand toe-to-toe with a lot of later units. They'll probably still not be quite as good, but 30 is respectable, certainly. And the other thing you'll notice is that they have 82 soldiers in the unit instead of 52 or 62. 82 is quite a bit, and you can see that it is much larger than some of their brothers. So yeah, a great unit. Total offense of 30 is excellent, especially since 20 of that is armor. And as a secondary, they have a sword, so you lose out on that armor piercing benefit, but they have an attack of 10 with the sword, so very deadly. And yeah, 5 turns to create. They're also very expensive to recruit, over 2,000. But for how great they are and for how many you get them or get in the unit, their upkeep is only 468, which, yes, it is expensive, but not quite as expensive as you might think. So a great unit. You won't have many of them in your campaign, but they will not let you down. And then we get to a couple skirmishing units that the Romans have access to. First, we have some Javcav, some Javelin Cavalry, and these guys are quite good. Good morale, good stamina, love to see it. Melee attack of 7 is actually pretty good, especially with a charge bonus of 6. That's very good for skirmisher cavalry. And then, of course, because they have this Javelin, they have a missile attack of 12, which is very nice. If you can get in the flank of enemy infantry, fire off a few javelins, you'll definitely wreak some havoc on them. So quite a great unit. I do like these guys a lot. The only downside I would say is the total defense of 7 is low. So yeah, keep them away from archers. They will take casualties from them, but I want to say you can upgrade their armor a little bit, which helps. And for the price, which is 173, I think, upkeep. Yeah, 173. That's pretty cheap. So not a bad unit at all. I typically like to have 1 or 2 of these guys in my army just for that javelin and also to help help track down fleeing units. So that's definitely a nice unit to have. A few more units I want to mention. These are more mercenary units that are available to you. First of all, we have the Turkopol horse archers. So a lot of these guys are Turks who have adopted Christianity and are now fighting for the Byzantines or the Hospitallers or other Christian powers. And they're really the only horse archer that you're going to have a lot of access to. There are some other horse archer mercenaries that you might be able to pick up, but these guys are available in a lot of Byzantine lands, and they're okay horse archers, I would say. They're not great, but they have good morale, good stamina. That's nice. Total defense of 10 it's a little low, I would say, but it's fine. Melee attack of 5, that's actually okay. Missile attack of 4 is okay for horse archers, so just very average horse archers, unfortunately, but they're going to be your main horse archer unit as the Romans, so they're okay. They will definitely do better against the European powers, I would say, because the Ottomans they will destroy you with horse archers if this is what you bring to the battlefield. The Ottomans and the other Muslim powers, I mean, horse archers are the name of the game for them, so do not send the Turkopols against the Ottomans. You will lose. But if you send them against, say, the Venetians or even the Bosnians or someone like that, these guys can actually do quite a bit of damage. So it just depends on how you use them. I wanted to talk about the Vlach horsemen as well, because we touched on the Vlach spearmen just a minute ago. And the Vlach horsemen are another surprising unit that I like. Now, they do have some downsides, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's look at their abilities first. Good morale, good stamina. That's great for horsemen. May charge without orders, not really a problem. Expert at hiding in woods. That's nice for ambushing and whatnot. Attack of 5, charge bonus of 6 is okay. I mean, it's pretty low for cavalry, but it's still definitely deadly. And then the total defense of 6 is terrible. So these guys will take casualties very easily, both in the melee and from missiles. But the reason why you might want to pick these guys up is because they are cheap. I wrote it down somewhere. No, I lied. I didn't write it down, but I want to say their upkeep is about 200 or so, which is not bad for cavalry. And then they also have, as a secondary weapon, an axe with an attack of 6. So that's actually really good. So if you... these guys, I would say, they are a fleeing general chaser. That is the main reason I picked them up. If the enemy is defeated and their general is running away on horseback, I send my Vlach horsemen to go mop him up because they are quick. They have that axe, which is quite deadly, and they're great for harassing skirmishers or flanking. So yeah, they'll be killed by pretty much anything if you're not careful, but because they're cheap and they have that axe, they're definitely worthwhile in some situations. And then moving on to just 3 more mercenary units, you do have access to the Stratiots later in the game, which is an excellent light cavalry unit. So we can see powerful charge, good stamina, all this good stuff. I'm sure I'll cover these guys again at some point. I want to say I covered them with the Venetians too, so I won't talk about them too much, but you do have access to them as the Romans. Total defense of 11 is pretty low, but they are light cavalry, so that's not entirely the point. The point is they need to hit hard and they need to hit fast, and that is what they do. A charge bonus of 15 is very deadly. Their secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 10, which is very good, and they are quick. So yeah, Strads are amazing. They always have been in this game, and if you need some light cavalry, this is not a bad choice at all. And then 2 more units. We have the Alpha Rats, which you have access to, and they're a halfway decent medium tier cavalry. I would say I would rely more on your Lancers. They'll do much better and be cheaper in the process, but if you need to pick up 1 more cavalry unit, you can do worse than the Alpha Rats. Good morale, powerful charge. Charge bonus of 11 is pretty average. Total defense of 15 is pretty average. Yeah, they're pretty average all around. As a secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 6, which again is very average. And they are cheap to recruit, but expensive to maintain because it is 400 for both of those. So as a one-time fee, 400 is not bad, but every turn, 400 for 1 unit, I would probably rather use that elsewhere. Still, though, you do have access to them pretty easily, and if you need another cavalry unit, sure, I might pick up 1 or 2 of these guys, but that's probably about it. And similarly, over in Anatolia, you do have access to the Arab cavalry, and they're kind of in a similar boat. They have 14 defense, charge bonus of 11. As their secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 6, so again, just very average. And it says here quality average for both of these last 2 units. Yeah, I typically just use these guys if I'm running low on my armies during campaign and I need to bolster the cavalry a little bit. Yeah, I'll definitely pick up some Arab Cav. Their upkeep is 370, so a little cheaper than the Alpha Rats, but still a little more expensive than I would like. But that's pretty much it, I would say. Obviously, there are more units that you have access to. Notably, the Byzantines get some Serbian and Bosnian and Albanian cavalry if you do end up in that part of the world, but I'm going to cover those units when I cover the Albanians, and I already covered the Bosnians and the Serbians, so I want to kind of move on. So without further ado, let's take a look at my most recent Roman campaign. Alright, so this is my most recent Roman campaign. It is currently 1468 AD, I'm about 83 turns in, and I am on the verge of winning. So if we look at my diplomacy, hold 40 regions, including all of these different places. I hold 56 regions, so I'm way over. I just have to take 1 last settlement, which I will in just a second. But if we look at my diplomacy, like I said, everybody hates you as the Romans. They kind of view you as outdated, and being Orthodox, you are enemies with the Muslims and the Catholics. So even though I play this game pretty fairly, I have a deceitful reputation, and if we look at my allies, the Hungarians, relations are poor with them. The Bosnians, my allies, the relations are poor. The Genoese, I'm still allies with them, but relations are very poor, and I'm also allies with the Kingdom of Sicily, and again, my relations are very poor. So even though they are my allies, they are not fans of me. Vassals, I did vassalize the Albanians. They actually like me more than the Genoese and the Sicilians do, even though I vassalized them. They were my allies for most of the game, but then they backstabbed me So I invaded Albania and vassalized them, and they have no longer been a problem, so that's good. Enemies are the Ottomans, of course. They have been my enemies for a very long time, and I'm sure that is not going to change anytime soon. So, okay, going back, we can see one thing you might notice is I actually don't have too much money. 29,000 is, I mean, that's a good amount of money, but for being this far into the campaign, it's actually not as much as I would usually have. And with your Roman campaign, money is going to be a problem pretty much the entire time. And you have access to a lot of rich settlements, but you are going to be fighting on so many fronts with so many armies that, yeah, it is going to be expensive. And if you like to build in all of your settlements as much as possible, as I do, yeah, money is going to be very tight. That being said, you do have access to some very rich areas. So, for example, you can see here that I'm making almost 7,000 in Constantinople, which is very good. I have a very good governor here who has all sorts of great traits, and we have access to all of the best units here. So many great units here in Constantinople. I showed you earlier how I trade settlements with the Genoese, and I did that in this game, which gives me access to a citadel where I can create more line infantry. And my goal was basically rebuild the pre-1071 Byzantine Empire as much as I could. So I wanted to take over all of Anatolia, which I did, and then start pushing back into the Balkans. So in my campaign, the first thing I did is I actually blitzkrieged the Ottomans right off the bat. I moved into Thrace quickly. I took Radestos, and I took this city too. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. They continued to hold Edirne, but I took this later on in the game. But what this meant is I now had kind of more of a base of action here in Thrace, as well as some great recruitment centers. You can see here I have just I've been pumping out units here. I have a swords guild, I believe, yes. And Radestos is also a nice little city to have to train some Venetian archers, which is nice, as well as get some extra trade. So once that was done, I made peace with the Ottomans, and then I moved into the Venetian islands, I want to say, but then was instantly attacked by the Knights Hospitaller up here on this island, as I kind of mentioned before. So I actually lost this island. I had to retake it, and then I decided to cancel what I was doing against the Venetians and move everything I have. What do I have here? Oh, I got a faction leader. Okay. Move everything I have against the Knights Hospitaller. So I did that. I retook Rhodes. I eliminated the Hospitallers. And now I had another really good base of operations for moving into Anatolia. I finished up with Crete and the other Aegean islands. I let the Genoese keep Lesbos and Chios because they had been loyal allies, but I kicked out the Venetians, I kicked out Florence, I destroyed Epirus, and at that point I had a little bit of money. I had built up basically my forts here, and I decided to attack the Ottomans everywhere and with everything I had. So I moved up Thessaly towards Thessalonica with a few armies. I attacked Anatolia from Rhodes, and then I also crossed the Dardanelles, and I took Bursa and a few other settlements, and my war in Europe was not going well, but my war in Anatolia was going a lot better than expected, and the Ottomans had moved most of their armies into Europe at this point, so I decided to hold the line in Europe and just push everything I had into Anatolia. So I pushed all the way. The Kandarids were holding on, so I took them out as well. And then the Karamanids were gone, I want to say, at this point. So I was able to take these lands from the Ottomans. And there was quite a bit of fighting. There were some pretty key battles, but I did wipe out the Ottomans in Anatolia and reconquered it for Christianity. And over here, I have my veterans from the campaign, and I decided that I would just let them live out their days here. They had seen enough action. After this, I sailed down to Cyprus, and I took out the Crusaders there, taking it back for the Byzantine Empire. And then, now that Anatolia was secured, this was just a few turns ago, I decided to get all of my other veteran forces together and push into Serbia and up into Bulgaria. So we can see here that, yeah, I'm kind of holding the line against the Albanians. I don't have a great military, but the Albanians have been leaving me alone. They're busy fighting the Turks as well. I did take Thessalonica, which is a very good city. You can see I'm making quite a bit of money from there. And then I moved up into Hadrianopolis as well, which gives access to a lot of great units. So that's where it is pretty much with the campaign. I was thinking about expanding into the Crimean Peninsula because Theodoro was somewhat of a remnant of the Byzantine Empire. I want to say it was more associated with the Empire of Trebizond over off the map, but still once Greek lands. So I thought about expanding there, but it didn't really seem worth it. So I decided to kind of finish the campaign. So over here, about to start my invasion of Serbia, I have 3 elite armies, just a bunch of my veterans. You can see just the best of the best here, as well as my faction heir leading a force of Serbians and Albanians and Varangians, Venetians, just a great army here. And then my last army, again, we got more Albanian cavalry, we got some of the excellent javelin cavalry, just a lot of great units. And this is my main force right now, and my goal is to liberate Serbia from the Turks. But again, I'll probably never get there because I only need to take one more settlement. And if we go up here, here we are. This is the last settlement I need to take. Obviously, this is one of the settlements you start with as the Byzantines. I gave it up to the Genoese. The Genoese held on to it for a few years, but then they lost it to the Ottomans. And now I am here to reclaim it. So I've got some excellent cavalry, some veteran nobles, some of those pikemen I love, some Spanish skirmishers, another unit I'll cover later, but a great javelin unit, and some just phenomenal archers. So here we go, we attack Mesembria, we can attack it because of our cannons, and I think we'll win this. The army strength ratio is 70-3, they have 23 men, and here we go. So we win back Mesembria, and this is the end of my Byzantine campaign. So there we go, we'll just walk in. And there was no victory conclusion, so that is odd. Usually I should have gotten a victory conditions met. Maybe I'm missing something, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what went wrong there. I practiced this once or twice and it worked just fine, so maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm missing a settlement, I don't know. But essentially, I have won the game. There's pretty much nowhere else I need to conquer. So, a great campaign. If you want a campaign where you're fighting uphill the entire time, then the Romans are definitely for you. There's a lot of kind of like role playing that was fun to go with this campaign, just rebuilding the Roman Empire and whatnot. Quite a lot of fun. That's about it. The only thing I want to see is like how the rest of the world map is going. So. Oops, let's toggle off the fog of war. I think it's been a pretty standard campaign. The Genoese are up here in the Crimean Peninsula. Moldova's doing pretty well. They've expanded across the steppe. Wallachia is doing really well. They're into the Hungarian plains and Transylvania. The Ottomans are definitely not doing well at all compared to how they're usually doing. They still have a very firm grasp in Bulgaria. But I've taken most of their lands. They're now caught up in these wars against the Serbians and the Bosnians, which have been going on for decades at this point. Italy is all over the place. The Venetians are suffering a little bit. Germany is all over the place. Looks like we have Bohemia kind of expanding along with the Swiss, which is interesting to see. But yeah, pretty typical game apart from the Byzantine experience. As for factions that were destroyed, Epirus was destroyed, the Hospitallers were destroyed, the Caramatids and the Candarids, and I had a hand in all of those, but everyone else is still alive, so kind of an interesting end of the game. But yes, would definitely recommend the Roman Empire, and had a great time with it. I typically get bored probably about 60 turns in, but with the Romans I was like, no, this is fun, I'm gonna keep going, and that is where I am. So next time, I have finished a few other campaigns, so it's just a matter of finding the time to make these videos and record them, but I do have quite a bit ready to go. I have finished an Albanian campaign that I want to cover. I've finished a Wallachian campaign. I've finished, who else? I've finished a Sicilian campaign. What else? I'm almost done with an Austrian campaign, so we'll probably cover them soon. I'm working on a Kievan campaign. I'm also working on a Crimean campaign, and I'm also working on a Karamanid campaign. So I've got a lot in the process. It's just a matter of finishing them off and finding the time to make the videos. But yes, more will come in the future. And as for the Timur podcast, my podcast that covers the life, conquest, character, and legacy of Amir Timur, we will be back to that shortly as well. I've been working on an episode for that. So yes, you will hear from me soon. But other than that, that's pretty much all I have. So thank you for watching. See you next time.